Welcome back to another explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most massive paradigm shifts in web development, the separation of concerns. Back in the early days, HTML basically had to do it all. But eventually, developers realized that decoupling the raw data and structure from the visual design was a completely profound software engineering breakthrough. So we're going to unpack exactly how that breakthrough works today, demystifying CSS, and looking at exactly how we style the modern web.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. 1. Styling the web with CSS. 2. Anatomy of a CSS rule. 3. Connecting CSS to HTML. 4. Targeting with selectors. And 5. The cascading priority. Let's get right into it.
Section 1. Styling the web with CSS. Let's set the stage on why we even need this tool in the first place.
Picture early web development for a second. You've got your HTML structure built out, but styling, well, it was a total nightmare. HTML just simply wasn't built to efficiently handle heavy design tasks, like trying to assign global color palettes or manage complex center alignments at scale. Relying on HTML alone for visual presentation basically just created this messy, unmaintainable code that completely bogged developers down. Enter cascading style sheets, or CSS. Now, CSS is not a markup language. It's a dedicated style sheet language designed to work perfectly in tandem with HTML. And the golden rule here? Separation. It's all about keeping our raw data and logical structure entirely divorced from our visual presentation. This is such an elegant system because it allows you to completely overhaul the look of a massive application without ever actually touching the underlying HTML.
Moving on to Section 2, Anatomy of a CSS Rule. Let's actually break down how this code works. A block of CSS code is incredibly logical. Honestly, it's essentially a recipe. It always begins with a selector, like the word body, for example, which tells the browser exactly what to target on the page. Then, this is followed by a declaration, which contains sets of properties and values. So you have a property, like color, paired up with a specific hex code value representing, say, a dark gray. That property value pair acts as a single command dictating exactly how you want that targeted element to appear.
Now, as your designs scale up, you're naturally going to apply multiple styles to a single element. In a standard declaration block, you can have fonts, colors, backgrounds, and margins all stacked neatly together. But here is the absolute most important thing to remember: the punctuation. The entire group of declarations has to be tightly surrounded by curly brackets, and every single property value pair must end with a semicolon. If you forget just one semicolon, the browser will literally ignore your brilliant design. Punctuation in CSS isn't just grammar, it's the actual glue holding your layout together.
All right, Section 3, Connecting CSS to HTML. Let's look at how we link our styles to our structure.
We basically have three distinct ways to connect these styles to an HTML document: inline, embedded, and external. Each method definitely has its specific use case, but as we're about to see, one method completely dominates modern web development.
Writing an inline style is pretty much like moving at a snail's pace. You have to manually add the style attribute to every single HTML element across your entire document. If you want a consistent look, you're forced to duplicate your code relentlessly. External linking, on the other hand, that's your rocket ship. You write the rule exactly once in a totally independent CSS file, link it to your HTML, and boom, you instantly style an entire website that could consist of hundreds of pages.
And that rocket ship efficiency all comes from a single, simple line of code placed in your HTML header using the link element. You simply declare the relationship, the rel attribute, as a style sheet, specify its MIME type, and then use the href attribute as the map to point directly to your CSS file. Just one line of code, and your entire presentation layer is connected.
Section 4, Targeting with Selectors. Let's talk about precision styling.
When it comes to targeting elements, you've got a sliding scale of precision. A tag selector is intentionally broad. It targets every single H1 heading on a page, for instance. A class selector, which is triggered by a period in your CSS, is great because it lets you group specific elements together so they share a unified style. And then, for absolute laser-focused precision on a single unique element, use an ID selector, which is designated by a hashtag. Of course, to keep our code clean and avoid repeating ourselves, we have some advanced tools up our sleeves. The asterisk acts as a universal broad brush, targeting absolutely everything in the document. You can also nest selectors to style things specifically based on their context, like targeting only the bold tags that sit strictly inside a paragraph. Or you can just group completely different elements together with a comma. That way they share the exact same style rules, and you don't end up writing redundant code.
Section 5. The cascading priority. Let's figure out what happens when our rules conflict.
Look, when you're writing styles, rules will inevitably collide. It's just a fact. And when they do, the browser relies on a strict tiebreaker hierarchy known as the cascade. Inline styles trump everything, entirely overriding other rules. Then comes the high-precision ID selector, followed by classes, general elements, and finally, sitting all the way at the bottom of the priority list, the universal selector. Getting a solid grip on this cascade is literally the absolute key to troubleshooting complex CSS bugs.
Now, there is one super powerful property that lets you completely ignore these normal stacking rules, and that's absolute positioning. Normally, elements flow exactly how they appear in the HTML. But when you specify an element's position as absolute, it rips it entirely out of that standard page flow. It basically gives you God mode control to pin an element exactly where you want it, based entirely on its distance from its parent's margins. It is a total game changer for building dynamic layouts.
So, we've seen how HTML builds the raw structural skeleton, and CSS breathes visual life into it, allowing you to perfectly separate data from digital artistry. With the power to pinpoint specific elements and flawlessly orchestrate conflicting design rules, the entire canvas of the web is yours to play with. So the real question is, how will you use these tools to completely redesign your digital world? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.